Thank you very much, Shengen, for those very kind words of introduction, and thank you all for being here today. Your interest is ensures that we have a continuing interest and commitment in improving nutrition in the world. One of the major problems of nutrition, of course, is that nobody actually feels fully responsible for it. And you have many ministries, for example, health ministries, who do not think very much about how food impacts on nutrition, and agriculture ministries who don't think very much about how to improve nutrition. So this is a major challenge for all of us, and it's very good to see all of you. I will try to come back on the weekend before the week before Super Bowl next year. Very great American tradition. So I'm very impressed that all of you are here on Friday. So I'm very appreciative of this. Let me quickly try to run through a very long slideshow which I have, and basically what we have are three major challenges. The challenge of hunger, you all know, Shengen has just described some of the numbers, but we also have to remember that there are other macronutrients which need to be taken into consideration. The traditional interests of nutritionists is really on micronutrient deficiencies. And this is a very major problem. The WHO estimates that well over 2 billion people suffer from at least one significant micronutrient deficiency. And this is often referred to as hidden hunger. The third element, of course, is this growing problem of diet-related non-communicable diseases, often associated but not necessarily with overweight and obesity. And so what we have seen in recent years is various estimates of the burden, the economic burden of malnutrition. And the current estimate, which we used in the prelude to ICN2, was to suggest that about the economic burden is in the region of about 5% of world economic output. Okay, so that's not inconsiderable. Recently, some of you may know that that McKinsey Global Institute has done its own estimates, and they suggest that the economic burden of obesity alone is in the region of about 2 trillion annually, third only to war and smoking. Okay, so it's way, way up there. And the good thing as far as the US is concerned is that we have a report from last year suggesting that in the previous decade, childhood obesity in the US went down by 43%, much of it in the second part of that decade. So that was a very, very impressive achievement, which has a lot to tell for the rest of the world, because this is the fastest growing dimension. Now, let me run through the other parts of this slideshow. I've already mentioned about the number of people who are estimated to be hungry. We expect there will be some continued decline. Many of you have been looking at prices. Prices have stabilized and have come down slowly in recent times. And with the diminution of oil prices, we expect that there will be a further decline. Agricultural commodity prices will decline. But this, of course, means that farmers will have less incomes, and this will adversely affect many farmers' incomes for obvious reasons. There has also been, over the period since 1990, a fairly significant shift in the burden of hunger. And we see that East Asia has seen a great deal of progress, but also there has been some good progress in Latin America and the Caribbean. And unfortunately, Sub-Saharan Africa has not seen much progress, and now figures very, very prominently, although in terms of numbers, India and South Asia accounts for the highest absolute numbers as far as hunger is concerned. There are many reasons why progress has been slower. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the debates, and I won't go through all the issues. There are resource issues, there are economic systemic issues, there are other issues as well. And I'll just skip this to get to run through these slides. The next is to just give you a sense that the different burdens of malnutrition are very, these three maps give you a sense of wasting, stunting, and underweight. And you can get a sense of the pattern of these indicators of malnutrition in different parts of the world. Progress, there has been a little bit of progress, but as Schengen emphasized, the progress has not been very much as far as undernutrition is concerned, and this is a matter of great concern. So overall, what is referred to as hidden hunger at a global level, this map basically gives you an indication that much of the problem is to be found in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as South, as well as Western Asia. Now, I'm just going to run through these quick slides to give you a sense of how slow the progress has been: anemic children, vitamin A deficiencies, and iodine. Now, of course, the impact of child and maternal malnutrition child and maternal malnutrition are some of the most serious problems, and they have the largest adverse long-term effects. And this is, you probably can't see many of the numbers, but it gives you a sense of how serious the problem is. Now, in the 2013 edition of the State of Food and Agriculture, which is our flagship publication, and the last issue of SOFA, which was overseen by Keith Wiebe, whom we lost to IFPRI, that issue basically highlighted what we call, we emphasize the food systems approach. This was a necessary response to the trend in the previous half decade or so, making this distinction between nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive interventions, and discounting the impact of nutrition-sensitive interventions by 80%. So basically, $1 spent on nutrition-specific interventions were deemed to be 5 times as impactful as nutrition-specific. So food systems were seen to be a minor emphasis in dealing with nutrition. So this was addressed by that particular issue of SOFA. Now, I mentioned the McKinsey report earlier, just to emphasize that for overweight alone, we find that they estimate that 2.1 billion people are overweight. If you look at the WHO website, you'll find a figure of 1.9 billion. So I'm not sure where McKinsey gets its numbers, but we are talking about very, very high numbers. And for those of you who have followed the work of Samuel Popkin, from I think Johns Hopkins, he has been looking at this particular dimension of what he calls the nutrition transition. But basically, we are talking about 30% of the global population being adversely affected. And as I mentioned earlier, obesity is the third largest, imposes the third largest economic burden. Now, running very, very quickly, we find that overweight and obesity are rising very rapidly. In the old days, we often simplistically associated this with rich people. In fact, actually, it is poor people in rich societies who are the most adversely affected by these problems, and we find that the new middle class in many developing countries are also victims of this problem. Of course, we know that much of the problems are related to changing lifestyles, and there's very little which can be done in terms of reversing that change in lifestyle. So we need to find solutions which are sustainable, but also address the reality of irreversible urbanization and some of the other problems. Here you get a sense that we have, that many countries deal with multiple problems of malnutrition, not just one, sometimes not even 2, but 3. There are about 16 countries in that area. There are only 15 countries in the entire world who do not have one significant malnutrition problem or other. So I will not summarize the trends. This slideshow will be available. The long version of this slideshow will be available on the website for those of you who are interested. But we do know there's a broad understanding about what needs to be done. We also know that having cash alone is not necessarily going to solve many of the problems of malnutrition, and we need to find ways and means, creative ways and means to address this. And we find, for example, that school feeding programs and so on have been very impactful in this regard. So reforming the food system is an important aspect, but if you look at the ICN2 outcomes, it only accounts for about a third of the recommendations which are made. Another half are mainly health related, and then what is called water, sanitation, hygiene recommendations account for the remaining 6. So what needs to be done is pretty well known. There has been some good progress in recent years. For example, the G8 and now the G7 have taken up this issue. We have seen the Secretary General's Zero Hunger Challenge. We have seen the emergence of the Sun Movement. We have seen the Prime Minister Cameron of Britain highlighting it at the Nutrition Summit, setting up a global panel. And the US in May last year set up the global, USAID announced its global nutrition strategy, all of which are very, very important. So we have a cumulative momentum, and that momentum has to be translated into making a huge impact. And this is the big challenge for us. The two major ICN2 outcome documents are the Rome Declaration and the Framework for Action, and there are quite a number of commitments which were made in the Rome Declaration, and about 60 recommendations which I alluded to earlier in the Framework for Action. What we need to do now is to particularly work on one recommendation, namely to have a sustained effort over the next decade, very much in line with the Compact 2025. We see 2025 as an important target date. This is also in line with many other initiatives, including the initiatives in Latin America and the Caribbean, initiatives in the African Union. The King of Lesotho, for example, who is a champion on nutrition, was a very active participant at the conference, and a whole range of other initiatives which are taking place. And 2025 is a very important target date, but it also means that we need coordinated and complementary efforts. This will go to the Economic and Social Council, hopefully around March this year, and we hope that the General Assembly will approve the recommendation and declare a decade of action on nutrition for 2016-2025. We hope to work together with all of you. We hope to work with the World Bank, with the USAID, with IFPRI, and of course with civil society and the private sector to make malnutrition a thing of the past. Thank you very much for your attention.